Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Appreciate you joining me here for another week. Before I get into today's topic, please make sure that you're subscribed on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. Apple, Spotify, Google, you will be able to find the podcast on every single one of those platforms. So please subscribe, and while you're there, leave us a 5-star review and share it around with anybody who you think might get some value out of what it is that I am doing here. You can also find the video versions of this podcast released every Wednesday evening Australian time on our YouTube and Facebook pages. So follow us there, subscribe, do all the clicky things that you need to do on the internet to help us continue to grow it. Appreciate your support. Appreciate you listening every single week. If you're one of our loyal listeners or viewers, you guys are the absolute best, and the messages that you send me for questions that you have and support never go unnoticed. I try and get back to every single one of you when you do send it through. So if you've got any suggestions for any future episodes or topics that you'd like me to cover off, or even guests that you'd like to hear on the podcast, I'm trying to move into a phase we're in November this year, come hopefully by 2024, where we're starting to do some guest interviews from people that you would like to hear and that I would like to have a conversation with. So send me a message on any of the social media platforms, and hopefully I can start to get those people on and have a conversation with them that is enjoyable. This week, I want to talk about life existing on a spectrum. And what I mean by that is, I think all too often there's this feeling. No, I know I felt it. I know that people that I've coached and spoken to, whether it's friends, whether it's clients, whether it's even some family members, sometimes there's this feeling and this expectation that we need to be all or nothing in one particular state. And this has come about from a conversation I was having with a client of mine. And we're talking about men, and we're talking about the whole masculinity argument right now. I'm not here to get into an argument about masculinity and my thoughts on that whole internet dynamic that is going on. But there needs to be an element for men where I believe that we feel capable. I think there's inherently grained this thing where we need to be able to provide something for our families and for those that are important to us. And within that, there needs to be a feeling of physical capability where we need to be able to physically apply ourselves. But in the same breath, we also need to be able to transition into this newer world that we're moving into, which is very different from the way I was brought up, where it's okay to express our feelings. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be there and be a present father for our children. But there needs to be there's a dynamic between the two, and it's almost like there's this expectation where we need to be either in one camp or the other. And I don't believe that to be true. I believe that it exists on a spectrum. And what I mean by that is I believe we need to be able to move through those phases as the need arises. Like, we need to be able to be physically capable in certain circumstances. We need to be able to, it may be an extreme situation of that where maybe we need to be able to defend ourselves, or we need to be, in that kind of dominant stereotype in a particular instance. Not all the time, but in a particular instance. And then there's going to be other times where we need to shift back on the other end of the spectrum, and we need to be vulnerable. We need to talk about how we're feeling. We need to be that present father, husband, and human being that we should be, that for some of us wasn't ever displayed to us from our fathers. But we don't need to be all in one camp or all in the other. And I think that a lot of angst and anxiety for a lot of men comes about from this expectation that we need to be all or the other. And we absolutely don't. Like, it's a spectrum. We need to learn to be able to move from one end of it to the other as the situation or the circumstances allow us to. And you can apply that spectrum into a lot of other areas of life as well too, whether it be motivation, whether it be discipline, whether it be, happy or sad, whatever the case might be. Like, we don't need to be all of one thing all the time. And speaking from my own personal experience here, I know that a lot of times where I've felt very overwhelmed by my world and my particular life, it's because I've been giving in to those expectations that I need to be all one or the other. And I need to be all in one, like I need to either be all vulnerable or I need to be all conquering, right? And there's no in between, there's no gray ground. And yes, there needs to be a conversation there about not letting other people's expectations influence how you're feeling. And that's something that as I've gotten older, and I think as everybody gets older, we get a lot better at. We start to care less about what other people think, and we start to care less about other people's opinions of us, and the circle of people that we actually care about gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But I think there's also an element where there needs to be a message out there that it's okay to move from one end to the other. It's okay to be vulnerable, but then it's also okay to want to be physically capable and be able to express yourself in a physical way in a controlled environment where it's not hurting other people. It's okay to stand up for yourself. It's okay to do all these things. And then it's also okay to then be able to go and cuddle your children and kiss your children. Like there's no shortage of, cuddles that happen in this household because that's the way I want to be as a father. I don't want my kids to ever feel like they're scared to come to me with anything, that we're going to be supportive of them no matter what. But it's that moving through the spectrum. And I don't believe even a lot of people you will see out there, I don't believe anyone ever lives 100% in one area or the other. And I think one thing that not only do we need to put that message out there, but we need to try and equip people with the tools to deal with those emotional states when we're in there and just say, hey, it's okay to be that way. It's okay to be a little bit down sometimes. You don't have to be happy all the time. It's okay to feel a little bit unmotivated, because there's going to be times where your motivation levels are going to be super high. It's okay to be a little bit undisciplined at different times, because that's going to be the way, or in different areas of your life. And if we're talking about the motivation and the discipline piece, like motivation, there has been times in my life where motivation has been absolutely non-existent. And I'm not even talking about days, I'm talking about years. Like there are other external factors that are just impacting that, and there is absolutely no motivation there. You're never going to be motivated all the time. And as a result, then we feed into that discipline spectrum. Like you're going to feel very undisciplined you're going to be very undisciplined with certain things. You're not going to maybe do that little bit extra. Back to last week's podcast, maybe you are just doing the bare minimum. That's okay. It may not have come across that way when I was talking about that last week, but there's going to be some times where maybe you just need to do the minimum because it's going to be better for your mental health to actually just tick the box and get on with it, and then work to get a good night's sleep and then do a little bit extra the next day. Not to play catch up, but just because, hey, we're a little bit further back towards motivated on that spectrum. And that's the thing. Like there's the pressure from expectation that you're required to be a particular state all the time can be crushing for some people and actually stop them from taking any positive action. And I think we need to learn to be able to grow within the spectrum of life on whatever we're talking about. If it's for men on that masculinity scale, if we're talking about being disciplined, we're talking about our emotional state. Like we're never fixed in a particular state, and we need to be okay with that. And we need to understand that it's okay for us to move through different elements of life spectrum based off what circumstances we are presented with. And that I believe is how we adapt and how we evolve and how we grow as human beings. And then when we're actually able to sit in that state and deal with it, it's almost like this freeing feeling of, I'm okay to be here. And then we can start to actually make some positive, if it's a negative state, because some of these states aren't necessarily going to be positive, despite it being okay to be in that state. Once we acknowledge that it's okay to be there, then we can start to make positive steps and take action to move us out of there, rather than just getting so wrapped around the axle and feeling so anxious about, oh, I'm not meant to be here, I can't be here, and then trying to, it's almost like being in quicksand and fighting a losing battle. But just appreciating the fact that we're there and going, all right, now let's start to move in the opposite direction. And you can release that pressure, and you can start to understand, all right, like, let's start to move this thing forward, and let's start to move back to the other end of the spectrum. And that's something that I don't think gets talked about enough. We're never going to be all of one thing all the time. And there needs to not be an expectation for us to be all of one thing all the time. You can't be everything to everybody, but what you need to be is you need to be happy with yourself and where you're at the moment. That doesn't mean you shouldn't want to improve your situation at all. I've done an episode where I've actually spoken about it is okay. I believe it's okay to be happy with where you are and still want to improve. Just because you want to improve doesn't mean you're unhappy with where you are. You can always want more. And it's a completely different spectrum. We're going to move through seasons in life where there's going to be external circumstances which are going to influence our ability to take action or to do a particular thing. And we need to understand that, appreciate that, and then address that situation with the required state to yield the best result for us and those that are important to us. And I think the first part of being able to do that is understanding that nothing is ever fixed. It is a spectrum that we're going to move on through life, and we need to know what the best state is going to be to deal with the circumstances that are brought to us. So hopefully that all makes sense. I was kind of I did write some notes on what I wanted to cover off, but the whole thing that I wanted to really get down to is, like, don't get wrapped around the axle of thinking that you need to be stuck in one particular state all the time. It's just not realistic. It's not going to happen. No one is ever all one thing all the time. I think the biggest difference for those people that feel happy with where they're at and their internal state and their self-confidence is they're okay with where they're at based off the circumstances that they're being presented with. Sometimes that's going to be that they're highly motivated. Sometimes it's going to be that they're not. Sometimes it's going to be that they're highly disciplined. Sometimes that it's not. But understanding where we're at and not beating ourselves up about being there. And then if we're not happy about where we are, starting to take those steps to improve that situation. That's a very big, important part, I think, to just living a happy life and being a more content human being. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you feel that pressure to kind of be all of one thing or all the other, whether it be around, masculinity, being a father, being motivated, being happy, being sad, whatever the case might be. Like, let me know your feedback. Send me some messages on the socials. I'm really interested to open up a conversation about this and see what other people are feeling, because it's been something that in my life has come up a lot, and in the lives of the people that I've spoken to and coached over the years, I see it as a pretty reoccurring theme. So thanks so much for listening. Appreciate each and every single one of you. Take care. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.